I suppose in this case, we are trying to leverage on the brand Islam. Recently, I think there was an article by Jonathan L. Wilson, University of Greenwich. He said that brand Islam is fast becoming the new black in marketing. Yeah, he actually quoted several examples. For example, in terms of the acronyms for the new emerging markets. In 2011, you have BRIC, Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, and China. And in 2013, you have MIN, Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And he said the concentration on the Muslim countries, so he sees vast potential of the Muslim country. He also mentioned that global expenditure on halal food and lifestyle is estimated at $2.3 trillion US dollars. And Muslim is considered as the third 1 billion in terms of market opportunity. 1/4 of the world's population are Muslim, with half of the Muslim under the age of 25. So I think in terms of brand Islam is joining sector together, including fashion, cosmetic, entertainment, tourism, pharmaceutical, education, professional services, and others under one narrative. Do you agree to that, Mr. Iqbal? What the observation by the Professor Jonathan Wilkinson?
Certainly, I totally agree with that, and I also want to build on what Musa said about WIEF. You see, in the Islamic world, we are very fortunate that we have first and foremost a spiritual and moral capital. We are the last recipient of the moral capital in its final form. Then we have the human capital. Large, growing population, as we just pointed out, younger population. This is the engine which drives the economies. The West is encouraging immigration inwards because they need the future generation of children to run their economies. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with mineral capital. If you look around the world, we are blessed with not only oil and gas, but every conceivable form of minerals. And then on top of that, we are blessed with financial capital. Now WIEF acts as a connector of all these forms of capital. So Musa talked about the women, the youth, but also it's a platform which connects businesses, public sector with private sector. So I agree that, it's holistically when you look at the world, today you see that the Islamic economy, as Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid talks about in Dubai, is coming together. And in this Islamic economy, banking and finance is just one part of it. The halal food, the Muslim lifestyle market, and the whole area of, value-based investing, ethics-based investing, and corporate social responsibility, running of businesses, is becoming a very important growth engine. So all those things are coming together under the WIEF umbrella. All the side meetings which happen are connecting these countries. If you look at the trade flows between Indonesia and Malaysia, the trade flows between Saudi Arabia and Malaysia, the trade flows between the intra-OIC trade flows, there's a huge jump in that trade flow. Our economies, while they are growing, they were before, the trade flows were the colonial routes. Now the emerging markets are trading with each other. As a result, the intra-OIC world is also trading more and more, investing more and more with each other. And I think that's where WIEF plays a very important role. And I agree with Tun Musa in the wisdom of keeping an indigenous format to WIEF, because our situation is different. And we want to have grassroots involvement. We want to have mentorship program. We want to have that connectivity. So I think the WIEF acts as a connecting platform, and I agree with the professor's work at the Greenwich University that these are huge opportunities for the Islamic world and for the Muslim Ummah.
So you see in the future the brand Islam will be more widely accepted worldwide, I suppose, because I suppose Islamic finance, we have been promoting Islamic finance, and then we have Islamic economy. I think at the conference yesterday, the Global Islamic Finance Conference, I think in one of the sessions, Dr. Daud mentioned about connecting halal economy to the Islamic finance, because currently there is no connection between halal economy and Islamic finance. How do you go about trying to connect both, halal economy and Islamic finance, because it has to be the entire value chain as well, like you rightly mentioned.
I think it's only a logical happening that cannot be avoided, because if I'm in business, I'm looking the way of financing, I can surely see that Islamic banking, with the principles and the things that go with it, are the best offer that one can get. Actually, it's already happening in a smaller way, but the fact that it's mentioned is a good realization, and how the potential is just amazing. That's why I always say this, the most un-Islamic countries are interested in Islamic banking and the halal food industry. And where are they going to get the money? Through Islamic banking as well. They see this. Please add on to what I'm saying here.
No, I think that Ustaz Daud Bakar's comments were very relevant. The whole idea about connecting the financial economy with the real economy is a very important one. And this is the essence of Islamic finance. So connecting Islamic finance with the halal food industry, with the Muslim lifestyle market, with the socially responsible investing industry. This is of appeal not only to the Muslims, but to all of humanity. And I believe this builds what I call the alliance of goodness between the children of Adam. And the innate nature of every human being is to do good and to be part of goodness. And I think the more we connect Islamic finance with the real economy, the more we will be able to bring authenticity to Islamic finance. And the future growth in Islamic finance will happen in asset management in the real economy. That's where we can create what I call the demonstration effect for Islamic finance. We can talk about it for as long as we want. But the moment there's a demonstration effect, then things move and happen. And this is really builds to Musa on our history, on our legacy. Our prophet was a trader, our first caliph was a trader, our second caliph was a trader. They were all businessmen. And therefore transparency, good governance, ethics are all part of our tradition and values, and something which everybody can relate to. So the more connectivity happens between the financial economy and the real economy, the better it is for the Islamic financial system, for the Islamic countries, but for the rest of the world.
Mr. Iqbal, you talk about value-based investing, socially responsible investing. There's a huge market to actually be tapped by Islamic finance as well. If you look at socially responsible investing, they are consistent with Islamic principle. Based on the figure, there are about 11.2 trillion US dollars in funds seeking to invest in socially responsible investment. Islamic finance is consistent with the principle of socially responsible investment, but we have not gone to actually promote Islamic finance as socially responsible investment. Only now, when socially responsible investment become the trend, then only we say Islamic finance is consistent. Perhaps we should have done it earlier, before socially responsible investment become a trend. Why is it because lack of marketing from Islamic finance side? Why only now we are saying that they are consistent with SRI, when in fact they are the foundation of Islamic finance in the first place?
So if you look at the history of Islamic finance, we took a decision early on that we will not wait for the ideal framework to evolve to start Islamic banking. So we started what is called the Sharia compliant form of banking. When we went the banking route, we knew that we were making a choice. The financial intermediation would take place through Islamic modes and through the banking mode. And the new banks had to distinguish themselves from the existing bank. So Dubai Islamic Bank could not call itself Dubai Bank. It had to say, I am different. So they called itself Dubai Islamic Bank. The first bank in Bahrain had to say, well, I am Bahrain Islamic Bank, because they are other conventional banks. So that was their distinguishing trademark. And these banks were operating in an environment, if you looked at the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, the regulatory enablement was not there, the accounting standards was not there, there was no IOFI till the 90s actually. There was no IFSB at that time. So they did not have the regulatory enablement. So these banks basically focused on community banking, serving the local community. And secondly, they distinguished themselves as banking models and said, we are catering for the Islamic customer. That's how they were distinguishing themselves. As the industry building institution came into place, there was a level playing field being created by enablement, strong leadership by government of Bahrain to establish IOFI, great leadership by Tansri Zeti to establish IFSB. Without her commitment, IFSB would not have happened. Let us recognize this fact. That led to a level playing field. So the Islamic financial institutions became widespread. Conventional banks opening Islamic banking windows, conventional bank having Islamic banking subsidiaries, the whole process of evolution. In this process, in this history, asset management was kind of left to itself. And asset management became the weakest link of the Islamic finance industry. Now, without a robust asset management, we could not create products of investments, we could not democratize investments and savings. We also could not give strength to our takaful platforms, because takaful premiums have to be invested and they need to realize a good return in order to offer a competitive product. So asset management, only in the 90s when equities opened up an asset class with the launch of the Dow Jones Islamic Index and that landmark fatwa which said equities and as an asset class can be done, and certain form of conventional structures are allowed, conventional receivables, conventional debt, because we are not in a perfect world. This is why we call it the Sharia compliant form of banking. So as asset management emerged as a product in the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, it had to build a track record in order to attract institutional capital. It had to get rated. All this takes time and effort. So now as asset management is getting greater mainstream relevance in the Islamic countries, it's building a track record, it's getting rated, the institutional capital is opening up to it. And also the Islamic finance industry, as it gets more mature, is getting comfortable. It's not branding itself as Islamic, it's branding itself as ethical. So if you look at the new institutions which have emerged in the Islamic world, for example, all the new Saudi banks which have been granted licenses, Bank al-Bilad, the first institution to be licensed by SAMA as Islamic bank, saying that we are Bank al-Bilad, we are the bank of the homeland. Jadwa Investments is leading investment bank. They are just ever growing, evergreen. They're beautiful names. But they are appealing to distinguish themselves from the founding institutions of the industry. So the trend is changing. Now where it is headed is towards greater CSR alignment, toward the industry, that $11.2 trillion pool of ethical investment pool, the CSR investment pool, and there's a greater convergence in that space. But also in the interim, what would happen is as asset management becomes credible and asset management in the real economy, Islamic finance will gain greater authenticity. And also the institutional capital in Islamic countries, which is huge, with the sovereign wealth funds, with the central banks across the OIC world, that capital would also come into the Islamic finance industry, creating a quantum leap for the Islamic finance industry. But I believe you are absolutely right that the alignment between the Western investors who invest on value-based, CSR-based investment and the convergence with Islamic investing would create a quantum leap for the Islamic finance industry.
I think it's very well put in terms of the historical perspective as to when, why, where it happened and reached this level here. I just very briefly say this, and that is Islamic banking, even though it had existed for many, many decades as described, had been taken for granted, had been in a corner shelf as and when necessary it was used, in a manner of speaking. In Malaysia, I was privileged to be in government when the first Islamic bank of the country was set up, but with Dr. Halim as the initiator of it practically. But even those days, Malaysians did not understand, even the Muslims did not understand. It was another bank, it was Islamic, so because of that they tend to be prepared to go in. They've got that confidence, being Muslim. The non-Muslims were looking askance for some distance, oh, they won't come. But you see what it is now, Malaysian Islamic Bank, so many non-Muslims are customers of the bank and happy about using it. That's point number one. Point number two is that within this recent history, there was this scandal in the standard banking system. That scandal was so enormous, it hit so many people, it was so scandalous, it was so disastrous that the whole banking community, including the non-Muslims, were looking for something better. And there was this thing at the corner shelf that is called Islamic banking. They sort of out of curiosity, they look at it, oh, they start saying oh and oh and oh. And on top of that, the rather passive Islamic bankers and financiers started coming out. They themselves are looking at it and realizing that the standard banking system had failed. So they went into this. So that explained why I have been saying always within the last year or so, I said, Islamic finance and banking has caught fire. In other words, suddenly discovered, oh, this is it, this is it. And the third point I want to make is that we must admit that because it was taken for granted in a corner, we took for granted, but once we are in it, we start asking questions, we start learning. We talk about Sharia compliant. Whoever thought of banking with Sharia compliant? For the non-Muslims, they started looking at Islamic jurisprudence and law. They even read the Quran, trying to understand. I think it's a big achievement for the Muslim community to get the non-Muslims to understand. And I would finally say, as a final point now, to say that Islamic finance and banking is actually still work in progress. Yet in the meantime, there was this surge of interest, and the progress demanded of us is very intense. And our reaction to it is very intense. We attack it from all fronts, if I may say. Putting aside my World Islamic Economic Forum, we have this Royal Award. Everybody is trying to promote it, actually. Very positive, something that's very positive happening. So the challenge, I think, to the Islamic banking and finance community is how to hold this together. Back to your original point that you're saying. How to hold this together in all aspects of business, Islamic business that relate to the Muslim Ummah, for example, how to utilize this together as a package and make it stay. The resilience of it is a challenging thing, because however much you talk about religion, when you're dealing with money, the challenge is how to keep this together. I think that is what we have to deal with. And all the things that we're doing now are just part of the encouraging and part of dynamically moving forward.
You know, Tun Musa raised a very important point, which really connects us to the future of Islamic finance industry. And the biggest limiting factor for Islamic finance is not regulatory enablement, it's not the availability of capital, it's not the availability of opportunity, it is talent. And I think Islamic finance industry will do well to take a leaf out of WIEF and focus on the youth, as being consumers of tomorrow, as being managers of tomorrow, as being leaders of tomorrow. And that's where we need to invest. And I think the WIEF platform and the Islamic finance industry should work together. Tun Musa, what you are doing, inshallah, has to come together to the Islamic finance industry to create greater value. Thank you so much, sir.
Tun Musa Hitam, Mr. Iqbal Khan, it has been a pleasure talking to both of you at the Viewpoints at the Royal Award. Thank you very much for taking the time off to be with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you.